Good. So, are we working? Make sure it's working. Yeah. So tonight's share was called Teva, what it is and how to beat it. So I say when I was preparing earlier, don't be fooled by the fact there's only three svarim on the table. That's sometimes when it's much worse. Um, anyway, so basically, I don't know if you read the Indian magazine. If you look at next week's, I do a column every month, and the column is about remarkable Jews that I come across. And I think I mentioned to you I went to interview a couple in Borough Park last week. Did I tell you this story? It was a very interesting couple, and they're actually related to the brother of the lady is one of our chaverim in our shul, and he also sometimes comes to our share here, but I won't mention his name. But anyways, he told me the story, and I got very excited about the story. So that's why I went to interview them. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he's Bob Chassid, and she comes from really a Litvisha background. It had been suggested to them that they meet before, but she was a bit concerned about the age difference. But 2 years later, it came back to life in all sorts of interestingly spooky ways, as these things tend to do. And they get married, and they just a month or so ago had a baby. When I went to visit, there was this tiny little baby in a crib, which was very, very sweet to see. And then they told me the whole story. He had been, I said to him, how many, because they'd been out with, and they'd waited a long time to get married. I said, how many girls do you think you've gone out with? So he said, do you know those 55-seater buses? I said, yeah. He said, 10 of those. So over 600 girls, actually. Right. So I've never seen girls that were like measured by buses before. But you think about it, there's a lot of people. It's actually a good way of doing it. She'd also had gone out with many young men, and just for whatever reason, nothing wrong with them. Actually, yes, something wrong with them, which is really the point of telling the story. She's a lovely person, very sweet, but she does have a problem. Had a problem, and that was she's allergic to nuts and other stuff. It's hardly the end of the world, and it wasn't an allergy that was life-threatening, because some nut allergies are literally life-threatening. People can die from them. It's not that bad, but it's certainly not good. But it certainly was a bit in today's hypersensitive young men, because the girl has to look like Vashti or Lahavdil Memu before they'll even ever think about going out with her. The fact that they couldn't go to a restaurant in the first couple of days would be a bit, and then, I don't know, and that sort of stuff. The fellow told me that he went to get a bracha from Rav David Abachatzera. And of course, that's a famous Sephardi Kabbalistic address. Two of the, actually might even be him, was in Gateshead at my time, I'm not sure. But certainly two of the grandsons of the Baba Sali were in Gateshead at the time. And there were also some remarkably scary things went on in contact with these people. So of course, Rav David said, given bracha, you should certainly get married, and also said, and when she gets pregnant, all the allergies will disappear. Interesting. Anyway, so they met. Oh, the age difference is 15 years. She's 35. And he's 50. So as I say, when I wrote this up and when I finished writing the piece, people might go, "Phew." I said, just meet them. The guy who's determined that she has to be the most perfect girl, etc., etc., and the girl who wants the most perfect fellow, you know what? As he said, his musa was, his advice to people was, what you expect, what you can expect, reasonably expect when you're 18, 19, 20, Shidduch is not what you expect. You expect when you're 25, 26, 27. What you can expect when you're in your 30s is very different to what you expect when you're 40s, etc., etc. So he basically wanted to say that we should be realistic. And she said, of course, being a woman, much more umuna, they should never give up hope. But anyway, so I said to them, of course, did the bracha come true? And then she just pointed to in the middle of the table, which I hadn't even noticed, and there was a bowl of peanuts. So as soon as she became pregnant, all the allergies which she suffered with all her life just disappeared like that. Interesting. Okay. So I think you would say that's a bit of a spooky event. Yes, yes. In Parshas Chukas, there is the famous thing of Moshe hitting the rock. I've got my new hammer here. This was a gift from one of the gentlemen sitting over there. He thinks I should have a gavel. It says "Oh nuts" on it. Anyway, soft call stuff. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm on sponsorship from Oh Nuts for this year. Okay. So, kachas amata v'hakel sa'ida. Take the story, take the congregation, kahila, and take the matzah in your hand, or the onats matzah. And ata v'aron chicha v'yidavarta the sun, and speak to the sun, and speak to the rock, and enema nosa mem of me, and say something. He'll speak to the rock, and the water will come out. The supporter there says something very interesting. He's got a whole large introduction about everybody seems to be very confused about this, and he says the following thing. He says you should realize, or he wants you to realize, from Kisvei Kodesh al Echad Megim Uponim, that miracles work in one of three ways, the three types of miracle. Echad Nes Nister, the first type of miracle is a Nes Nister. And the Nes Nister, come as you read some motor, that's like rainfall. Rainfall, the whole Masech and Shas, Tanis is almost continually about rainfall and lack thereof. Or if a person is saved, they're in a terrible situation, a physical situation, they've got a terrible diagnosis, a chas v'shalom of disease, or their finances are a disaster, and suddenly it all turns around. There's no lightning bolts, there's no, razzmatazz, it's just, he says that's a nes nister. You don't see the Yadashim. The next level of miracle, he says, is a nes nigla. But he translates, or rather he divides nesim and nes nigla into two, nesim negolim into two different categories. The first is, I think we actually discussed this about 6 months ago. The first thing is a nes nigla shebederech Teva, an open miracle, but in a Tevadic way, in a normal way. So, for example, if you ever study geography, you will know that the topography of the surface of a riverbed very often shows and betrays the fact that the course of the river used to follow a different direction. And sometimes you can find it's called a spur. It looks a bit like a horse spur. So the river used to go like that, so there's a big trench dug in the side, but now it goes in a different direction. So over a very large amount of time, hundreds of years, then rivers do change their courses, but it takes a long time.
Erosion.
Sorry? Erosion, and even more, sometimes more dramatic stuff than just erosion, but certainly the general process is erosion. So it normally takes a long time. So I want you to imagine that when Klal Yisrael were going in the desert, instead of a miraculous spring, let's change, just for the purposes of emotional, let's change the circumstances that a river followed them. Why not? Wherever they went was this river. So when they got up and moved, then the river would follow them, a bit like a snake following somebody, but rivers do snake. Now this is obviously an open miracle. I mean, wherever you go, a river sort of like follows you. That's obviously a miracle, but it's a miracle which is mimicking nature. It's just nature behaving in a miraculous way. It's taking a natural phenomenon and, as it were, expanding it, speeding it up.
Where's water turned to blood is miraculous?
Sorry? Oh yeah. So hold on. Let's get to the next stage. So the next stage, or the last stage, now we can come back to your blood. So the next stage, he says, is a nes nigla shelo b'derech hateva. So Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron were supposed to speak to the rock, and then water would come from that space that the rock occupied, right? The area, right? The volume of. So we're sitting in a room here. The volume. Imagine this is one big rock, and suddenly it becomes a vacuum in space, a hole in space, with water pouring out of it. This is a nes nigla shelo b'derech hateva. Right? There is no phenomenon of suddenly a hole opening up in space, and something can get out of it. So those are the three distinctions that the Saporna wants to draw with regards to how Nisim work. Okay, fine. So far so good. And Sefer, Das Chochlan Musa.
I'm just trying to visualize it.
Sure.
I mean, water goes with gravity, so were they even traveling downhill throughout 40 years?
Well, it was a well. In my moshel, I'm making up a river. There was no river.
So was there before that?
Yeah, it was that was certainly springs. There are springs that occur in nature, so that would be only Madriga number 2 type miracle, wouldn't it? You can find natural springs, And of course, that was the Taina. That was the Taina of the people who made fun of Moshe Rabbeinu. No, not that rock, yeah, because there's a spring. There used to be a shepherd in this desert. You know what the springs are. Do that rock over there. And that's why, of course, he changed his. He didn't do it because the obvious answer to that was, why did he change it? So the answer is because he felt that Klal Yisrael, now they're rebelling over water. Hashem's told them what to do. So why did he change it? That's apikoursis. Moshe Rabbeinu changed it, and the answer is, of course he changed it because he felt that the circumstances before, when Hashem told him what to do, were now changed to the reality of now, because now Klal Yisrael have made fun of him and have mocked the whole process. And as a consequence, therefore, they're no longer roy for a miracle on the highest possible madriga. You have to be in the highest possible madriga to get a miracle on the highest possible madriga. So if they're rebelling over water, and I speak to the rock, which I'm supposed to do, to make this whole big hole in space, water miraculously coming out, but they no longer roy for that miracle at that level, so nothing happens, will that make the rebellion better or worse? Much worse. So therefore you thought, I'll hedge my bets. I'll do miracle at level number 2, the middle level, right, hit the rock, because some rocks actually do contain, they're hollow inside and do contain water. I mean, that's a well-known geological phenomenon. So it's obviously not the amount of water that will feed 6 million people, or whatever the number was at that stage, 600,000 medicines. I'm not sure exactly what the number would be, but that would be, as we said before, a natural phenomenon expanded beyond the normal boundaries that there will be roy to. So his kavana was to protect Klal Yisrael, which was always Moshe Rabbeinu's role. So what did he do wrong? So the Alshich answers that one, and he says that, remember it says, take them in front of, go back to the pasuk. Wrong chumash. Take them to the rock, and here's the lashon again. Within their sight. And that's what they were supposed to do. And it'll give water to the people and feed their cattle. Now the obvious question is, how could they possibly see it? Remember, I told you this when we did this last time, but sometimes when I give shiurim to big crowds, they put 2 big screens on either side. So you're in the middle, and you're also on either side. And the very strange thing is nobody ever looks at you. Which is very, very strange. Remember last time was... Sorry?
The screens are larger than life.
Yeah, the screens are larger than life, but I'm life. Right? It's just a picture of me, I'm over here. And even if it's not so huge, last time it happened in Muncie, it wasn't such a big hall, but people look at there and I felt like going, look at me. But of course, he'd be doing that as well. Anyway, but to cut a long story short, Klal Yisrael, the area of the Machane, the encampment of Klal Yisrael, you remember how big it was?
4 mil square?
It was 12 mile. So a huge number. I think it's 12 mile by 12 mile. So they all went to look. They didn't have big screens. So how did they see it? Well, how did all the animals in the world get into the Teva? So either that space somehow expanded to see it miraculously, or they all shrunk, something like that. They remained shrunk. Moshe certainly loses his temper, as I'll say, in his Madriga, and that distorts his clarity to see that even though, the circumstances changed, but Hashem obviously still wants it to go through at the highest level, because they're all standing on the rock. Fine. There is a very, very interesting Ramban, Ibn Ezra, and Rashi. And this is in Bereshis and Memvov to Tezvov. It's always easy to remember. Mu 2. This is one of my favorite tricks. When we don't actually have it here, Baruch Hashem. I saw about six months ago a whole bunch of very well dressed black people on a Sunday, African American people, going around wearing suits and stuff, like knocking on doors. And I thought it must be some sort of Christian missionary chevra. They never came to my door, and I didn't get any trick-or-treaters either. Nobody likes us. Anyways, but basically, what happened is in England anyway, it used to be every Sunday there were people who came to the door, and they would sort of, try to convert you, which didn't really work. When sometimes if I was being a bit naughty, I would say, "Is that a Bible you're holding?" Well, of course, certainly. Sometimes they lie and say, "They're holding a Bible in their hand, they come to tell." We come to talk to you about the terrible state the world's in. Really? Anyway, Christian mission. One of my favorite tricks was, "Is that a Bible?" Yes. could you turn to chapter 46, verse 15, Mu 2, right, which says, Eli b'nei Leah asher yoda liYaakov b'padan aram v'esdinon b'toy kol nefesh banav b'nosav shloshim b'sholosh. 33. And you remember what Rashi says there? If you do the math, 32. So here's the Rashi. Shloshim b'sholosh b'praton, if you count them up, Iyata might say Ela Lamed Beis, you only find 32. So how does the Torah say 33? And of course you're having good fun with them. So you get them to count it. It takes to what? To count to 30. And they've got I say, problem? Looking angelic? Maybe try again. Okay, still 32. Maybe you just... Anyway, so eventually, there's only 32, aren't there? Yeah. But the Bible says there's 33. Do you know why the Bible says there's 33 and there's only 32? Well, I do. And until you do, don't come back. Boom. And then anyway, but it's good fun. Anyway, Sof Kol Sof, Rashi says, what? Here's the solution according to Rashi. Zu Yechevet. That's Yechevet. Shanolda Ben HaChaves. She was born as they entered the border, Ben HaChaves, between the walls. Because when we actually entered the cities, that's just the city of the border when they came from Canaan. It says Asher Yodel Isol Levi B'Mitzrayim, because the Apostle says she was born to Levi Mitzrayim. Her birth was Mitzrayim, but her hara, her conception, was outside Mitzrayim. So as she was about to be born, she was part of the calculation. Right? She was almost there. And after she was counted, so you have it. Fine. That's what Rashi says. But Ibn Ezra, he says that can't possibly be true. It's a very interesting Ibn Ezra here. And he says the following thing. And that Gemara, the Rashi quotes, which is both Rabasa and Kuf Kof, astonishing thing to say, says Ibn Ezra. How can that possibly be? If you claim it's Yocheved, and Yocheved was born just as they entered Eretz Yisrael, and they were in Eretz Yisrael for 210 years, and Moshe Rabbeinu left Eretz Yisrael when he was 80, how old was she when she gave birth to? 130. 130? So he says, Tutmar Teva, as they say. That's impossible. Not, of course, interestingly, not the fact that a 130-year-old lady could have a child. That's not a plea, but the plea is, he says the following thing. Gamze Tema. So why doesn't it tell us that she gave birth, Yocheved gave birth to her son, which was 130? But lama hisker dober Sarah shows a bastician. It certainly mentions Sarah that she was a mere 90 when she gave birth to her son. And she also paid a bit, and he goes into some more detail, which we don't have time to go. So therefore, he at the end of the whole shtickle of the Ibn Ezra here, he says, no, it can't possibly be a Yocheved. Because the Torah clearly tells you about the miraculous birth of Yitzchak at that age, which certainly tell you about the miraculous birth of Moshe, which is, a mere 90 compared to 130. So he says that the missing 33rd person, it has to be the Yaakov, is included in the Cheshbon. Right, so that was the missing 33rd person. But the Ramban, he says like this. I want to tell you something which is emes and bora and clear in the Torah, which the Ramban often uses that notion. Ki hanisim hanasim alidei novi, that any nace that's done through a novi, she another came mitchila, who prophesied beforehand that such an occurrence was going to take place. On Malach, Nigla Malchus Hashem, Hiskar Malchus. Or a Malach comes along and says, as in the case of Sarah, that your wife is going to have a baby. And it comes true, then the Torah records that. But if such miraculous occurrences happen spontaneously, without any previous warning or announcement, any heralding, then it's not mentioned. La'az tzaddik v'tehel b'tzaddik, or la'achris rasha to kill the rasha, la'hisker or Torah oiben bim, la'hisker, it's not mentioned neither in the Torah or in the Vim. So,
About Chris himself?
what about Chris himself?
You have no Zara and nobody knows. Somebody told him before.
I'm not sure that, because he's saying if it's happening to a person, I'm not sure if he's making a chiluk between something that happens to a person and a natural phenomenon to the yam. Not sure.
Didn't Miriam prophesize?
Sorry?
Didn't Miriam prophesize that Moshe
Would,
that a mother will eventually give birth to the Savior of Israel?
It's not the Chumash though. We're talking written in the Psukim and the Chumash of the Torah. If the Medrash says that's a different word. He's saying that's why he says Zeklal Bora in the Torah itself. So Rabbi Yerucham in Das Chochum Musan and Chelik Aleph page Shin Nud Zayin says this. Listen to this interesting lashon here. Hine Mavor Ramban Yisoid Godel. The Ramban is saying here an incredible yisoid, an incredible fundamental idea. The Oisa Neshahu Nigla Begola Lekol. Any miracle which is open and obvious to everybody. Im ach lo yigla Hashem koidem al yidei novi harihu nister. And if it's not announced beforehand through a novi or whatever, a malach, then that's called a nes nister. But Yocheved holed bas kuflamet. Yocheved gave birth to 130. But Hari nes lo pachos mene Sarah. It's certainly no less than Sarah's miracle. Quite the opposite. It's more than Sarah's miracle. That's called nister. But that's an astonishing thing for the Ramban to imply. The shiflas the Adam Godola Kolkach. But what he's telling you is that it's the shiflas, it's the poverty of the human mind, and the human imagination is so so clear and so established. That the big miracles, but they aren't shown to you but warned beforehand. No big deal. Because they were not prophesied, then we consider them to be not significant. But if you're told beforehand, you go, whoa! The story of Rabbi David Abachatzera says, you'll see that as soon as she gets pregnant, the peanuts allergy will stop. And that was, a nice point when I was writing this up. And of course, when I was telling you the story, so it was a nice dramatic moment. You can see this in the playback later on the tape, right? When I paused, and what? I asked her, did it come true? The peanuts on the table. That's exciting, that's a story. But it's unless you're so warned beforehand and it comes true, then it doesn't impact so much. But what's the difference between the two? There's no difference. The difference is how we see it. The difference is the poverty of the human mind. Rabbi Dessler, in Michta Milion, he says, interesting, I might actually get this all in one. This is going quicker than I thought. Rabbi Dessler says, in Michta Milion, when he talks about Nisim, well, I heard this first year from Rabbi Miller, Rabbi Mordechai Miller, who was one of the Talmudim Nechokim, I'd say, of Rabbi Dessler, and he appointed him to be the head of Gateshead Girls Seminary. Still, I think, probably the most famous girls' seminary in the world. So he explained it like this. Before you understand exactly how a nace works and what a nace is, and we will certainly be going into this in more depth back to Rabbi Yerucham, but he says you have to understand what the definition of a miracle is. How would you define a miracle? Suppose we open a dictionary, or I was writing my own dictionary, the Y.Y. Rubinstein dictionary, and I got to the letter M for miracle. How would you define a miracle?
Supernatural?
A supernatural event.
Out of the ordinary.
Oh, good. Well, that's fine. Okay, so a supernatural event is something for which we, therefore, by definition, if I can expand on that one-word definition, supernatural means above natural, something for which, and I checked this up, and this is indeed the definition, or one of the definitions in the dictionary, is something for which we get no rational or scientific explanation. Right? Supernatural. Something which we get no scientific or rational explanation. And you said, out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Am I missing the plane that ends up crashing?
What about it?
It's not miraculous, but it's
Not
still
supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
It's not supernatural, but it's miraculous.
No, you've just given it a title to it. But if I'm a skeptic, right, I would say it's not a miracle. It's not a supernatural event. It almost happens all the every plane. You can check this out. I'm guessing, but I would say to you if I'm
I'd be
skeptic,
honest.
every plane that crashes, but if some guy doesn't have, whatever. That happens. If there's a statistical possibility, it's what we were saying before in Rabbi Yerucham. If you are pinned to the wall, and you can't, in fact, Rabbi Yerucham says that, if you're pinned to the wall and you can't get out of saying it's a miracle, that's an open miracle, an esnigla. But if you are, if you've got wiggle room, interestingly, I
Six-day
mean,
war.
sorry?
Like the 6-day war.
A miracle is the point where it's
Well, remember,
that's a miracle.
I don't want to get the politics.
It's also rational.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to get the politics. No,
It's
the
more of a miracle than missing the plane.
the 6-day war, a better the Entebbe thing. If you remember, there was a machlokes between Rav Shach and the Lubavitcher Rebbe on Entebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said it was open miracle, i.e., you could make a brocha if you flew over Entebbe, and Rav Shach says no, it's not. Right. So, but you're getting into definitions. So let's stick with this. So Rabbi Dessler.
In Hebrew dictionary, it said that Nes is Me'al Derech HaTeva.
Good. Well, Derech HaTeva, that's fine. Or as you said, once in a blue moon. So Rabbi Miller, when he was saying this over, said, I'd like to explain to you that both those definitions are in fact the same definition. Both of these definitions. One for which you get no scientific or rational explanation, or something once in a blue moon, they are both the same definition. So Rabbi Miller's, if I remember rightly, his example was the following thing. I want you to imagine that you are fed up and depressed about something, and you decide to go for a walk. So I don't know what it is. Your mother-in-law's coming to visit, something like that, and you go for. Oh gosh, I keep forgetting it's being videoed. There are certain jokes you don't say when it's being videoed, especially when you're the person doing the videoing. Very strange. Anyway, so you're depressed about something. The IRS is sending you a letter, anything at all. So you go for a walk, and as you're walking, you come to a graveyard. You pass a graveyard, and you go in and sit in the bench in the graveyard. Graveyards have non-Jewish graveyards have benches. Do Jewish graveyards in America have benches? No, good. And I wouldn't think it wouldn't seem right to me anyway. Okay, but non-Jewish graveyards certainly have. I've seen those, and you sit down at the bench. And when you think about it, graveyards are particularly good places to be depressed in.
Morbid.
Yeah, you could get them. Okay. So you're sitting there on your bench, and you're thinking about, the mother-in-law's visit or the IRS, or whatever else it is. And you've got in front of you a headstone, and the headstone says Robert Maxwell McLean, and born 1810, died 1860. Anyway, so you're thinking about this, and as you're thinking about your problems, you seem to notice that the headstone just moved. So you look, but the headstone is not moving. Right. So you go back to thinking about your mother-in-law, and then the headstone this time is definitely moving. It's going, and you're watching it, and the headstone's going. And as you're sitting there frozen to the spot, the earth in front of the grave starts going. Then it splits, and a casket, a coffin, pops to the surface. The lid flies off, and in there's a pile of dust. Now, as you're watching this, the dust starts to form bones. The bones start to knit themselves together to make a complete skeleton. The complete skeleton starts to be covered in flesh and muscle and sinew and eventually skin. We'll keep this kosher in a box of shorts. And a fellow sits up, opens his eyes, looks at you and goes, "Hi!" and gets up and walks out the grave. How do you react?
Pinch yourself.
You say, "What?" It's a very interesting reaction.
Take a selfie.
What?
Take a selfie.
That's brilliant. Excuse me, can I take a selfie with you? Oh, that's fabulous. Oh, I never thought of that before. You said a whole new age. They said, what was that fellow, the Lubavitch fellow who was in prison for a long time? Rabashkin. Somebody told me that they said to him when he got out of prison, was it 10 years or something he was in prison? They said, what have you noticed has changed? He said, what I've noticed is everybody's a photographer. Interesting, right? Because everybody's taking selfies and taking pictures of everything, and the police come up to you, you're filming them. Yeah, what did I do wrong? Yeah, you're on, and that sort of stuff. Interesting, but I never thought of that. The corpse comes out of the grave. Oh, hold on a minute, right? Actually, I'm not so sure about that. I think my reaction would be, Boomf. It's like there's a nice symmetry about that. One in, one out. You know?
Christian Doug.
Okay, fine. But have you seen a miracle?
Oh, yeah.
What was our definition? Something for which you can no scientific or rational explanation. I suppose you don't have the heart attack, and you go home and you can tell your wife, "You never believe what I just saw," and she's like, "Absolutely not." And she's on the phone to the mother-in-law, saying, "You know, I should not have married him. He was completely mad. I don't know what he's doing. You know, he must be drinking Irish single malt whiskey or Bardman or these horrible things." Fine. Anyway, that sort of stuff. Oh, but if you know, she'll be on the phone to the doctor, try and explain to the doctor what you saw. They're going to lock you up, right? It's certainly it's got no scientific or rational explanation. Once in a blue moon, yeah, thank goodness. This is a very rare event. I am very glad that in my lifetime, personally, I have never seen this. Yeah, or it would be back in the ground. Fine. Exact same scenario. Fed up, mother-in-law's coming to visit, all that sort of stuff. You go to for a walk, you come to the graveyard, there's the headstone, Robert Maxwell McLean, born 1810, died 1860, whatever it was. You're sitting there thinking and looking at the world in a depressed way, and suddenly there is a little seed which detaches itself from an overhanging branch in the tree, one of those little ones that look like a helicopter. And it drops onto the ground right in front of you. And we've got to keep you there in this one, in this particular story for 6 months. But we will bring you cups of cocoa and coffee. You will be fine. Do you do hot water bottles in America?
Nah.
I like that. You don't? Oh, that's so good. It's almost worth being sick just to get one. Keep your toes toasty. Anyway, so basically, we'll bring a sleeping bag, a little tent, a little sukkah for you. You'll be fine. And you notice 6 months later, on the very same spot where the seed fell, there's a tiny little shoot which has popped above the surface. Is that a miracle?
Teva.
Absolutely not. What was our definition?
Supernatural.
Something for which you get no scientific or rational explanation. You're supernatural, right? Ask a scientist, why does the seed grow? They'll tell you. You've got everything that you need for the seed to grow. You've got the moisture in the soil, you've got the minerals in the soil, you've got the photosynthesis that occurs from the sunlight playing in the soil. You've got all the ingredients that are necessary to make the thing grow. And therefore is, according to our definition, a natural event. In fact, our other definition was a once in a blue moon. But this is clearly not a once in a blue moon. This is something which is happening trillions of times every day, depending on which hemisphere you're in and what part of the year you're in. Right? So it's happening exactly in the southern hemisphere, exactly at this moment. They're coming to spring as we're going into winter. So there's a gazillion little green bulbs popping above the surface. It's not miraculous. But as Rabbi Dessa says, but that's not exactly how science works. That's not how science works. What science does is to observe the phenomenon, then assume that the things that cause the phenomenon are indeed causative. And Rabbi Miller gave an example. He said when he was in school, there was an interesting idea. There was I don't know if you ever had this example. There was a metal tray, and they had, this is very good, they had metal rods which were welded to the side of the tray. So it's not a flat tray, but it had an edge. So the metal rods of different metals going along the side of the tray, and it had a bit like a lamppost. It had a horizontal thing coming up. And then the experiment that we're doing in the science lab in the high school where he went was to test which metal is the best conductor of heat. So what the teacher did was to boil a beaker of water on a tripod underneath a Bunsen burner, because science teachers always like to use Bunsen burner. You can just switch on the kettle. I know he's got a kettle in his office, you know, his coffee, you know, do that. And then what happens is they took a blob of wax, stuck it under there, and attached a glass marble to each of the different metal rods. So there was a brass rod, there was an aluminum rod, there was steel, and all these various things. And then they pour in the boiling hot water. The students all stand above their notebooks. They've got to write which marble fell first. In other words, which wax melted first, and which heat travelled up, which metal quickest. Fine. And so the marbles begin to drop. Can you remember which metal is the best conductor of heat?
Iron.
Copper. Shame on you. That you should know. Copper is the best conductor of heat. So the marble attached to the copper rod, it falls first. Now, if this is a scientific experiment, what must we do next?
Test the others.
Nope. Prune juice. What can you do with them? What?
Test it again.
Do it again, go. Because that might have been a freak result, right? After all, a scientific fact is, another dictionary definition, an observable, repeatable phenomenon. It's got to repeat itself, because that might be a fluke. So he set it all up again, poured in hot water, just as Moshe said. Excuse me. And the marbles start to fall. And again, it's the copper. Okay, fine. So you now establish your principle. Or the other example Rabbi Miller gave was a row of test tubes. The premise is that liquids expand when heated. We fill the test tubes with various liquids, water, whatever, milk, whatever it is. Single malt whiskey would be a terrible waste, etc., etc. And then you take your Bunsen burner. The teacher gets to do this. Such a bummer. They always got the best things. Anyway, he puts the flame underneath the test tube, and the liquid starts to move up the test tube. You have therefore proven your idea. Of course, you'd have to repeat it. But once you've repeated it, then you've now proven that liquids expand when heated. Now, suppose nobody had ever done this before. Suppose this was my discovery. Professor Rubinstein. I recently became a professor, incidentally. My official title. I'm teaching in a school, and I'm teaching a degree course, and therefore I have become a professor. Just thought you might like to. I go to Rabbi Professor Rubinstein's school around on Wednesday night, just to show off to people. Anyway, so suppose nobody has ever done this before. It's my discovery. So I do the experiment over and over again. It then has to be peer reviewed. That's other scientists like yourselves do it, and you find it's the same thing. You then I then publish my findings in some scientific journal. And the scientific journal means that other people all over the world can review this and find gewaldig. We've now got Rubinstein's theory. Rubinstein's theory states that all liquids expand when heated. This is the experiment you can do. It's printed in all the school textbooks. So that in 2020, they're now teaching Rubinstein's theory, and this lasts for 10 years. Now along comes some other person, probably Jewish, clever clogs, and says, not true. Not all liquids do expand when heated. Water contracts, if I remember rightly, for the first 4 degrees, and only then expands. Do you remember? Is that right? It's 4 degrees. And then it expands. And that's...
When
so.
frozen.
Sorry?
It contracts when frozen.
And it contracts when frozen, yeah. But when you heat it, it also contracts and then expands. So if it's room temperature water and then you heat it, then it contracts and expands. So therefore, what will the year that was up to 2030, right? So in 2030, they discover that the natural fact water it contracts and then expands. What will year 2031's textbook say about Rubinstein's theory? No, we say all liquids expand.
Qualified.
That's right. Now qualifies. No change. All liquids expand when heated, except water, which contracts to the first 4 degrees and then expands. Science was never wrong. Science can never be wrong. When it finds itself to be wrong, it simply rewrites the rules. If you were to ask the scientists, what is it that makes the plant grow, the seed grow in the ground, they would say you've got the water, and you've got the flour, and you've got the all that sort of stuff that's necessary, because they see that that's what surrounds the phenomenon, and therefore assume it's causative. But if you find out, as they did in Israel, of course the world will never thank Israel for this, but millions of people's lives have been saved because Israel came up with the idea of hydroponics. That you can grow seeds you don't need soil. You can grow it in sand, you can grow it in newspapers. And therefore be able to grow a lot more food because of this great discovery. Then fine, it will simply change the rules. Science will change the rules. If you were to ask the scientist, why is it that the seed regrows, he's got an explanation, ready to be modified. If you ask him about the body reforming, he says that's an impossibility. But our definitions, I said to you before, are the same definition. Are they not? Because science has never got a definition for something that's a one-off, a once-in-a-blue moon. A scientific phenomenon has to be an observable, repeatable phenomenon again and again and again, like the seeds regrowing. A body coming back to life, that's one that's so rare as, of course it has happened.
This was sticking to the Big Bang Theory.
Sorry?
They're sticking to the Big Bang Theory, which is not a repeatable phenomenon.
Oh, absolutely. Therefore it's not a scientific fact at all. If you can't disprove it, a scientific fact has to be disprovable, otherwise it's just nonsense. But here's the next stage in logic. We'll leave it and come back to this next week. But therefore, here's the question. Suppose I'm sitting at a desk and I need to get a pencil. So I open this drawer, and in there's let's say it's a mechanical pencil. Or this one. This is I don't know which one this one is. Anyway, nice one, posh one. Pentel, I think it is. A Parker. It's actually a Parker. And let's say there are a box of 12 of these mechanical pencils there. Okay. I have two. In this drawer, there is another box of these Parker mechanical pencils, and this one is also a box of 12, but 3 have been removed. So this is 12, and this there is 9. What's the difference between this group of pencils and this group of pencils?
3.
3. So you should know as a matter of logic, if the only thing that distinguishes two sets is a number, is a frequency, then you're saying in logic they're identical. If in this herd of elephants there are 30 elephants, and that herd of elephants there are 40 elephants, and the only distinction between them is 10 elephants, apart from that you're saying they're identical, a herd of elephants. And if the only thing that separates a natural phenomenon to a supernatural phenomenon is a frequency, this happens all the time, and that's a once in a blue moon, then by definition you're saying that they're identical. But as a matter of logic, that might be the case, but not as a matter of psychological analysis. If I start to float and hover in midair and continue the rest of the few minutes while hovering in midair, you won't go back and your wife said, "How was the bird tonight?" So, "Oh, it's very interesting." "Oh, did I mention Robert Winston took off and floated in midair?" No, you're going, "I can't believe this!" And again, she'll phone your mother-in-law and get you arrested because it's the same as claiming that your body come back to life. But of course, when you see a miraculous event, because you've never seen it before, you go, "Oh, wow!" And you say, "Oh, but hold on, I went to that Kabul, and we discussed the fact that logically that's no different, to switching on a light switch or any other natural thing. So I'm not impressed." You would be impressed. So ultimately it turns out to be a psychological phenomenon as opposed to a logical one. We'll come back to this next week.